We have all heard about the Mauryan Empire, and we know that Magadh was the center of the Mauryan Empire. But most of us do not know that before there was a Mauryan Empire, an empire had already existed whose center was Magadh. In this series, we will see how Magadh, which was initially a Janpad, went on to become the first empire in Indian history. We will also see how various kings of Magadh contributed in this transformation. Our story starts around 6th century BC. In Indian history, this period is also called the Age of Buddha. That is because it was during this period that Lord Buddha lived. This period is also important because in the northern part of the Indian subcontinent and particularly in the Ganga Valley, various small states have emerged. These states were called Mahajanapada, and our sources of this period tells us that there were 16 Mahajanapads. Of these 16 Mahajanpad, there were 4 Mahajanpads which were considered to be the most important one. These were Vats, Avanti, Kosal and Magadh. Of these 4 Mahajanpad, we find that it was the kingdom of Kosal which was considered to be the most powerful one. Kosal, which roughly corresponds to the Awadh region, was the home of legendary Lord Ram. And during the time of Buddha, it was ruled by King Prasenajit. Kosal had acquired the dominant position in the politics of North India during this period because it had acquired the Mahajanpad of Kashi and kingdom of Shakyas. The Shakyas were important in Indian history because it was the clan of Gautam Buddha and he was the prince of the Shakya. Although the acquisition of Shakya and Kashi made Kosal the dominant power, but this was not the complete picture. We find that our sources tells us that the Kosal of this period was filled with internal strife. The conquered territory were always a source for nuisance and there were various rebellions in them. All of this meant that Kosal, which appeared strong from the outside, was actually internally very weak. The southeastern neighbor of Kosal, Magadh, on the other hand, was a completely different story. The Janpad of Magadh was situated in the southern Bihar region, and as we know that southern Bihar region is rich in iron ore, this meant that Magadh had large amount of iron which it can use for various purposes. The southern boundary of Magadh touched the forests of Chota Nagpur Plateau. These forests not only provided Magadh with resources for various crafts and industries, but they were also source for war elephants. And as we know, war elephant played a crucial role in ancient armies. The Magadhan capital, Rajgriha, was also favorably located. The capital of Rajgriha was surrounded by various hills, and these hills provided excellent defense against invading armies. During this period, Magadh was ruled by Bimbisara. Our sources tells us that Bimbisara became the king of Magadh when he was 15 years old. Although the exact date on which Bimbisara became the king of Magadh is difficult to ascertain because the lack of sources, but most scholars agree that it was around 455 BC that Bimbisara became the king of Magadh. When Bimbisara became the king of Magadh, he knew that he was not in a position to start a military conquest. So he decided to choose a different path. Our sources tells us that Bimbisara had 500 wives. Although this is certainly an exaggeration, but he did have several marriages. Of these several marriages, 2 marriages played a critical role in Bimbisara's as well as Magadh's future. The first marriage was with the sister of the king of Kosal, Prasenajit. King Prasenajit also gave a village in Kashi as a dowry to his sister. The second marriage, which was with the daughter of the chief of Phrygians, was equally important for Bimbisara. Vriji, who was the northern neighbor of Magadh, was a republic. And the story behind how the matrimonial alliance between the Phrygies and the Magadh took place is equally interesting. When Bimbisara ascended the Magadhan throne, Vrijians thought that this was a unique opportunity for them to acquire some Magadhan territory. This attempt of the Vrijians failed miserably when Bimbisara routed the Vrijian army completely. When Bimbisara defeated the Vrijians, he knew that he was not in a position to conquer Vrijian land. So he decided to sue for peace, and in his peace terms, he asked the hand of the daughter of the Vrijian chief. The Vrijians also thought that the marriage between the daughter of the Vrijian chief and Bimbisara would secure a powerful ally. So they agreed. The marriage alliance between the Vrijians and the Magadhans was quite favorable for Bimbisara. It secured his northern boundary. Having secured the matrimonial alliances with Kosal as well as the Vrijians, Bimbisara now was able to focus his attention in east. The eastern neighbor of Magadh was the kingdom of Ang. We find that our sources tells us that the kingdom of Ang had a long rivalry with Magadh. And during the reign of Bimbisara's father, we find that an Angan army had attacked Magadh. So Bimbisara wanted to take revenge, and this was a favorable time. The Angan army was no match for the Magadhan army, and Bimbisara was able to conquer the territories of Anga very easily. Having conquered the Mahajanapada of Anga, he appointed his son Ajatasattu as the governor of the Mahajanapada of Anga. When Magadh acquired the kingdom of Anga, Bimbisara knew that the rising power of Magadh would certainly make the neighbor of Magadh feel insecure. So he knew that he needed to form diplomatic relations with several of his neighbors. A suitable situation for Bimbisara arose when he found out that the king of Avanti became seriously ill. In order to gain friendship with the powerful kingdom of Avanti, Bimbisara sent his doctor in aid of the king of Avanti. This gesture of Bimbisara was quite brilliant because it not only secured the friendship of Avanti, but it also secured the southern boundary of Bimbisara. We also see that Bimbisara also sent an embassy to the distant Mahajanapada of Gandhar. All of these attempts of Bimbisara shows that Bimbisara not only knew the art of military conquest, but he was also well versed in the art of diplomatic relations. The person who transformed the fortunes of Magadh and made Magadh a rising power had a tragic end. Our sources of this period tells us that Ajatasattu, who was the crown prince, became very eager to become the next king. So he decided to usurp the Magadhan throne, and he put his father in prison. The last days of Bimbisara was quite miserable, and we know that Bimbisara died in prison. But how he died remains a mystery because we have two stories about his end. The Buddhist sources tells us that Bimbisara died of starvation, and the Jain sources on the other hand tells us that Bimbisara took his own life. Whatever the truth behind these stories, the fact remains that Bimbisara's death was a tragic one. The person who has transformed the fortunes of Magadh had a miserable end. In the next video, we will see how Ajatasattu transformed Magadh into the paramount power. Thank you for watching.